where this is interesting to me and problematic, and that's why I think we need to explore it and be transparent about it, is that it's a form of censorship. I mean, and in this case, it's literally censorship because it's the government. Like, we talk about censorship a lot, and people sort of go to that, oh, well, if it's not the government, it's not censorship. I'm not sure how useful that argument is, but let's just call it censorship with a lowercase c. So for many years, you've seen cases, many of which we've covered at Retraction Watch, of papers being, for example, retracted because basically, and not basically, there are journals that say this is what they're doing. Well, there's nothing wrong about the results, right?
Nothing scientifically wrong about
Nothing scientifically incorrect. And every paper has flaws. We're humans, and you want that because, not that you want flaws, but you don't want people to wait until everything's absolutely buttoned down, because other than the law of gravity, there aren't too many things like that. So,
and even that's but go on.
See, this is physics. I shouldn't have even said that, John, because I know somebody is going, Point taken. The point is that they were being retracted because the results, while as robust as any other results, might do harm, right? That's not a great reason to retract a paper or to. And by the way, again, just term of art or sort of detail here. Retraction doesn't actually mean removing it from the world. It shouldn't. It means stamping it as retracted. You should not trust this or rely on it. So you're not removing it from creation. You're just, again, you're labeling it. But the problem is that when you retract something for harm, or sort of say, don't trust this because it might produce harm, even if it's true, that's a problem. And I would argue that, and so that's been happening to people, like Michael Bailey, who spoke at the meeting as well, and who try and study, what they're studying in trans, like biology or in sort of some of these issues and what have you. In other fields too, abortion. And I want to, and so I would argue that what's happening now in terms of whether the executive order or what the effect of the executive order and the language is the same thing. They're saying it would be harmful to allow this kind of conversation and to allow that there are more than two genders, sexes. And so therefore, we're going to shut it down, right? And the reason I push on that is because I want people to see that no matter where you are on the political spectrum or on what you believe in science or trust or what have you, if you are shutting down inquiry, if you are shutting or sort of saying, let's not trust this result because it could be dangerous, harmful, you're engaged in the same activity. Now, if you want to do that, I think that's bad. But if you want to do that, at least be consistent. So if you're someone who is shutting things down, say, again, broadly speaking, on the left, for that, well, that's true, but it could be dangerous. And some of those papers, by the way, are actually flawed and should be retracted, but a lot of them it's just because of harm. Well, then you should actually be saying, okay, I see what you're doing over there, because you've aided and abetted. I want to give an example.
You mean, sorry, what are you doing over there with this new executive order, you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. You should recognize the behavior. You should recognize the strategy and maybe either agree with it, which I wouldn't argue for, but sort of recognize that recognize that you have, I would argue, aided and abetted that strategy by making it okay to squelch in some way discussions, findings, research that you thought would be harmful. Because the people who agree, I don't want to obviously overgeneralize or read their minds, but I would imagine that there are among the people you described who sort of say, I'm for this, like we should only talk about two genders. They're probably thinking, and maybe in a sort of well-intentioned way, doing anything otherwise harms people. So therefore, let's stop doing it, even though it's not reality. And so I want to give a quick example, which has nothing to do with any of this, but I think
when you say it's not reality, you mean there was actually no harm. Is that what you mean?
Well, no, I mean that what you're claiming is or isn't true. There's no reality to that. In other words, not no reality, but it's wrong. The facts of it, like there are two genders or whatever, like it's definitely more complex than that. If it's as complex as a lot of people would claim, maybe not, but it is more complex. And Alice Dreger actually wrote a whole book that involved this. I would say, I want to give an example that's sort of removed from this. So bear with me because it's probably going to seem unrelated for a second, but I think it gives a sense of one way forward, right? So in the 1980s, the New England Journal of Medicine published this very brief letter, right, from this very august, Harvard hospital researcher, physician, saying essentially that he saw that when he was wandering around the hospital and talking to people who had chronic pain, and I think it was due to cancer in this case, I'm pretty sure of that, and they were on opioids, right? They didn't develop dependence. Okay. Now, that's a pretty, that's a happy news story. Well, it's a horrible story because there are people in pain. But in terms of it's a positive thing. Like, good. Okay, so we don't have to worry about those people getting addicted to opioids. Let's make them comfortable. Okay, that's the message. And guess who really liked that message, right? Pharma, in particular the Sackler family and Purdue, love that message. They got that message into the hands of everyone they could, every doctor who could prescribe it, et cetera, for decades. And at some point, and really after a lot of what the Sackler family was about and the Purdue was about became evident, New England Journal of Medicine, again, decades later, so this is, I want to say, less than 10 years ago, they put a note at the top of that paper saying, listen, this isn't actually wrong because it was his perception. He wasn't claiming he had done some massive study. This isn't wrong, and we're not retracting it, but we're putting this sort of editor's note on it saying, you really shouldn't cite it because it's totally misleading. In other words, we now know so much more. We barely knew anything. Here's what happened because of it. And I actually give him credit for that. Maybe it's too late. You could do it differently. But there's something about having a discussion in the pages of the journal, maybe right on top of it, and flagging it not as oh my God, it's going to maybe harm someone, because it did harm people. And it says that, but not retracting it from the world or saying, you can't talk about this. That doesn't go anywhere good.